All right, so I'm actually about to make a video about depression because someone I'm actually subscribed to on my YouTube is suffering from depression, and I've been watching these vlogs. And this isn't just to reach out to her, but anyone who probably suffers from depression. Let's get this out of the way. I'm not licensed in therapy at all, but I have had a world or a foot in that world of licensed therapists where I'm like, I've dealt with a lot of them, and I've realized like not one size fits all, and overcoming your demons, your depression, mental health, all of that stuff can be very challenging because it's always different for everybody. That's the number one thing I've realized. So, I mean, I don't always recommend going to go see a shrink because those guys can be expensive and for venting purposes, I do think that they're very good, but it sometimes has some gray area stuff where I've seen a lot of therapists who I really don't think should be licensed, who aren't actively listening, and who like to gaslight their people because they say, well, subconsciously you're really thinking this, and that could be very harmful. I think that invalidation can be super harmful. And this isn't all therapists, this is just certain people. I actually have a buddy who's a therapist, and now he's getting out of it just because he kind of saw some of the same things I was, and he just realized the path wasn't for him, and he absolutely just despised the path. He didn't like it, and so I felt really validated in saying that. I've met some people who claim to have all these degrees and expertise when human beings are a lot more complicated than what the literature tries to explain it. Like Sigmund Freud obviously was a founder of modern psychology, but some of his concepts were so black and white, and they say that it paved a roadmap to a lot of stuff. But I really just don't see the connection there. Now, we do know of like borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. I'm not throwing the baby with the bathwater with all scientific research, but there's some of the stuff that, to me, at least in my opinion, just kind of sounded a little funky to like, why? And it's pretty obvious when you look in modern times. We have some of the worst mental health problems in our nation, period, and we have people continuously going back to these therapists, and it could be an endless cycle that really is just not healthy, and it's super expensive. Now, what is my experience with depression? My experience with depression usually stemmed from invalidation. And at least in my experience, I had to find the root cause as to why I felt so depressed. My childhood wasn't very reassuring. I just didn't really feel like I was properly guided when I was a kid. I grew up in a very narcissistic town, so people afraid to look at their faults, even adults too. Like some of the adults were super defensive towards small children. Like I remember one time in my childhood, it kind of stood out to me. I saw a water bottle knocked over, and I asked just politely, hey, do you guys know who this is? And this one lady shouted back at me, no, and don't accuse me of anything ever again. So it's like, yeah, I wasn't accusing, and they were so dead pressed on screaming at me and treating me like that. And it's like, that's like the town we grew up in. Just a lot of the stuff, once I bursted that bubble, I realized was not normal behavior. And then it all started to make sense that I was gaslit and everything like that. And the funny part is once I started meeting people who treated me like a human being and who validated my existence, I started having resentment towards the people who didn't, because I realized I was lied to for the majority of my childhood, which actually cost me a few experiences. And, obviously those narcissistic people are never going to admit to or have a come to Jesus moment or anything like that where they, realize, hey, maybe I shouldn't have treated that person. I don't expect that from people anymore. But it just kind of realized that I had like a whole existential breakdown when I started dating my first girlfriend or something like that. I was just like, I had to tell her that I've never been validated like this, and there were some serious psychological problems going on there because I didn't know if what was real at that point. So I think that's what triggered a lot of my depressive episodes and a lot of mental health problems that I had too. Because when I was a kid, even though I was the one who was kind of getting abused all the time, the doctor told me I was bipolar and I couldn't rely on any of my feelings. And You don't want to go through your childhood second guessing all your emotions. That's just not proper human development. And I've already come to terms with the fact that the people who put me through that are never going to apologize. That's just who they were. What matters is I survived it because I grew up in a system that was absolutely disgusting. And I'm realizing now that what's done is done. And, sometimes you got to move on from that. It also segues into why it's so hard in modern times is they like to overdiagnose stuff, dispense medication out to people like it's candy. And then you have a lot of people who go on social media and pretend to have depression for attention, where you see a bunch of people who have depressive episodes, have medication, all these kinds of things. It widens up the gray area. It makes it hard to tell who's faking, who needs what, who really needs things, because then you might have someone walking into a therapist's office and they're going to be saying like things that aren't really the truth because they're afraid to say the truth. Because what if they're in an abusive household? I remember when I was a kid. I told my doctor some things that were going on in my childhood, and I remember one of my parents coming into the room with the paper and the diagnosis, and they were basically saying, "Why are you telling them about these things going on, right?" or something like that, because you know how insane that makes us look. It's like, so I couldn't actually talk about the right problems, because I was kind of like, someone would be offended, even though I was the mentally ill one. And I think that's like the thing when you throw in actual like people who don't want to be talked to, like they've caused any sort of problems to someone's psyche or anything like that. It's a cold world we live in. Modernity is not this warm, fuzzy, inclusive thing that we really try to make it out to be. And I think that's what you got to kind of understand now. I'm not holding my folks to anything, but just at the time, it was an experience that made it really hard for me to get help sooner, because I really couldn't talk about the actual things. And the most advice I had was just get over it. And it was never really a exit. Like the therapist didn't really help. It cost my folks money. It cost me my time and everything like that. And I get it. They paid for it, but I just felt like if I had been put into different programs or put into certain environments sooner, I would, that's the regret I live with in my life. But you catch my drift. Modernity makes it super hard for people to actually seek some help. Now, medication, it's a very gray area topic. Some people need it, some people don't. Some medications serve good purposes, some don't. Like I took gabapentin last night because I was having a PTSD episode, and I had to use two to help me sleep, and I woke up very foggy brain this morning. And then when I came to it around like noon or something today, that's the problem, is I should have been up and at it right first thing in the morning. Some of these medications have some really gnarly side effects where you have to choose between being paranoid or being tranquilized. And sometimes the actual scar from your past is not really there. It could be very hard to figure that out. But that's the thing about medication. I kind of see it as just a band-aid to the overall problem with anybody who has depression. Now, it could help, and it could help you get down to a base level so you could soul search, but eventually you're going to run out of pills. And there's a difference between actually solving the problem or a fix that someone's dependent on. And that's like the really big thing for me that I can't go along with, is I just think that it's harmful, in my opinion, to tell people that they always need these medications. I'm not saying you shouldn't take them from the beginning, but like I said, I'm not a licensed physician or anything like that, so this is all just my opinion. But what I also recommend is, if you're going to be on those medications, you got to do some actual searching on why you feel so messed up and actually confront those demons and fix the problem at the core. Otherwise, it's like Ren and Stimpy with that happy, happy, joy, joy, where he puts the helmet on and you're forcing a smile. Eventually, that helmet's got to come off, and repression always leads to disaster. So that's just how I look at it. How did I manage to get to. And now this is the number one thing, is I know I already said one size doesn't fit all when it comes to therapy, but this is the thing, is how did I get past things? How did I make sure that I was okay? How did I eventually was able to take my mind off of the bad things from my past? And here's the thing. Sometimes I do look back and I do get, depressed again. And sometimes you are going to feel those bouts of sadness, especially in today's world where we're so connected but so isolated. You're alone with your own mind all the time. So it's really easy to introspect and look into your past and relive some painful memories. Especially, that's the challenge. You got to take your mind off it in some way, shape, or form. So what I did was I started playing guitar, and it was almost like when I started jujitsu. And jiu-jitsu was one of those validating experiences that kind of showed me how invalidated I was. When I started playing guitar and I started at 0 and got my way up to around the spot of 20, because it takes years to master that instrument. It's not easy. It's a skill. And I think giving yourself sometimes those feelings of frustration can help you deal with frustrating moments and just frustrating times, and when the plan doesn't always go your way. That's just my thing, is I think that having that goal, though, is how you're going to take your mind off of a bad past and bringing it towards a better future. And it works. It helps for me. I hope it helps for anyone. Now, I got one final word on depression, because you might not have been able to take anything. You might start finding a hobby. Maybe yours might not even be guitar. Yours might be something else. But you got to try and find something that you could really work on towards the future. And I think that could be very scary, because especially in modernity, you have a lot of people who aren't really doing anything, and they're always looking to put the people doing something down. And it's always like they don't lift themselves up, so they want to drag everybody down to their level along with them. Misery loves company. And that's the thing about modern times, is there's a lot of people who would rather sit on the sidelines than put themselves out there and risk the criticism and risk getting laughed at or risk anything like that. Because at the end of the day, you can't solve, all of the world. The world's a very nasty, mean place. But also, when it comes to depression, sometimes it does come back. And there's this lie that, there's going to be this moment where you're like, oh my God, I'm cured. You know what? That's a lie. That's completely a lie. I think it just gets easier, and you get affected by the depression like a lot sooner, like a lot less than you used to once you start building up towards more future things. Like resting when you need to and everything like that, keeping on the path, keeping consistent with your goals, all of that stuff. Don't think that there's ever a moment where you slay the final boss and it's a happily ever after with the credits roll. It's something that is with us for our lives, because we are humans. We get sad, we get depressed, we just find ways to cope with those feelings. And that's okay. A lot of people online like to say that cope is like this negative thing, like, oh, are you coping, bro? Are you coping? Here's the thing about cope. Coping is how we deal with negative emotions to make sure they don't come out in very violent ways. And we see a lot more people with mental health problems now, and I see a correlation, in my opinion, with the stigma around coping, how you're not allowed to cope. You're not allowed to make sense of the L's you take in life, because not everybody wins all the time in life. Everyone's going to take an L. It happens. And of course, the people who don't put themselves out there are going to laugh at the people who take L's on certain days. But when those people who are taking L's start taking W's, they're going to pretend like they're their best friends. So just keep in mind that it's always going to be a lifelong process, and you can't really hope to just make it all vanquish. You could just hope to get it better, like one day at a time, and see where it goes from there. But I think the number one thing that's important is that you don't give up, that you don't fall into the despair. It's like a Hallmark saying, but you might have depression, but depression doesn't have you. But yeah, that's what I got to say. Thanks for your 15 minutes. I hope anything I said helped. Peace out.